and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Scott Strasser, and my co-host is Jason Komet. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Scott. How's it going tonight?
Pretty good. I think that's the first time I've ever introduced our episode. It's usually something that you take on.
Yeah, I think I did it the first 99 times, so I figured you were due.
Yeah, well, to everybody listening, this is the YYC Soccer Podcast's 100th episode. We've been going for a little over 2 years and averaging an episode a week, but we've switched that up recently to 2 episodes a week. Quite the milestone, Jason. I know when we first started this, you referenced a stat. I can't remember it, but it was something like 90% of podcasts don't get to episode 10 or something like that. So we've really bucked the trend, I think.
I can't remember exactly, but it was something to that effect. But yeah, it's been really quite a journey to 100 episodes. It's been a lot of fun, and I think we've learned a lot. I'd like to think we've gotten better over time. I know my editing has gotten better.
I've listened back to some of the first episodes we did, which was back in the spring of 2023, and they were really short, right? And I think part of the reason is we just didn't have that ability to riff as well as we do now.
Yeah, I guess that's the process, right?
Yeah, but it's it's been a really fantastic journey, and I'm excited to see how the next 100 episodes go. But as we kick off our first episode in the 3 digits, Jason, I guess to any new listeners, would you like to explain what the YYC Soccer Podcast is all about?
Well, Scott, the YYC Soccer Podcast is all about soccer in Calgary at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels. We talk about the teams and the players from the city's soccer community, starting at the grassroots, going out to the amateurs, and all the way to the university and professional levels.
Yeah, and tonight we're going to talk mostly about the professional levels. We're going to recap Cavalry FC and the Calgary Wild's latest games this weekend, and we're also going to talk about the League One games that happened on Friday evening and preview the matches that are coming on Tuesday. And then I guess we'll reminisce a little bit more about our first 99 episodes and reflect on some of the things we've talked about in the last 2 years.
Yeah, looking forward to it. It's been quite the weekend even here. You know, who'd have ever thought the opportunity to go to 2 professional soccer matches in Calgary on the same weekend, 2 different teams, that would ever happen. And here we are.
Here we are indeed. You and I were both at McMahon Stadium earlier today to watch the Calgary Wild take on the Montreal Roses. And yesterday, I unfortunately wasn't able to make it, but you were at Spruce Meadows to catch Cavalry's dominant win over Bukoevec FC. So let's start by talking about those 2 matches with the Calgary Wild first.
Hi, this is Carly Johnson, and this is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So it looked very likely as we entered about the 85th minute or so that the Calgary Wild were again going to draw 0-0 at home. It looked like a stalemate with the Montreal Roses, but right around the 86th minute mark, Jenaya Robertson took matters into her own hands, or rather her own foot, and won the game for Calgary in dramatic fashion.
When I was watching this match, I really felt we were going to get a goal. And then we got to about maybe the 70th minute or so, and I just the hope of that seemed to be fading. But that was a great cross from the right side, right into the middle of the field with Jenaya Robertson. Yeah, she made no mistake on that and hit the post, but it still went in. Great strike and a dramatic way to end and get the victory.
Yeah, obviously a huge moment for Calgary Wild in their young history. This was the first home goal. So the first goal scored at McMahon Stadium in the Northern Super League. And what a goal, hey? Jenaya Robertson really connected with this. Posting in, top corner. And yeah, you talked about Sarah Griffith's low drive to the top of the box from the right wing. She made that play happen. She'd come on in the second half. And yeah, she managed to pick her pass perfectly, and then Jenaya was able to win it for the Wild. And, you know, we were talking before this game about how tough of a game it was going to be. Montreal Roses, up until this point, were the only unbeaten team left in the Northern Super League. They'd had 3 wins and a draw. And at halftime, we were talking about how this is an even game. You know, Montreal doesn't look any... They don't look like world beaters out there, and the Wild, if they pick their moment, they could get 3 points today.
watching that game, I didn't really see Montreal being a dominant side like I was expecting them to be. They seemed to be head and shoulders above everyone else the first few matches of the season, but I thought the Wild were the better team, throughout the match, and they got the 3 points they deserved in the end, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Like right off the hop, the Wild were aggressive. They were pressing high. They were really enjoying themselves out on the right wing in particular. Sarita Thurton had another strong performance at right wing, and Grace Storty was getting involved with the attack as an offensive right back throughout that first half. And even though it was goalless when they went into the dressing rooms, it seemed like Calgary was the team more likely to score. And they did actually hit the post, right? Sarita Thurton hit the woodwork. I can't remember when, if it was toward the end of the first half.
Maybe around the 30th minute or so, someplace around there.
Yeah, and I don't think that was their only close opportunity, although that was the one that really came to mind. But in the second half, it was really even. And as the clock ticked down, I was starting to think like, man, geez, the fans of McMahon are going to have to wait yet another game before they're able to see this team score at home. And then, as we mentioned, Jenaya Robertson scored a fantastic goal. Pandemonium, hey, in the celebration. Everyone got involved with that. I noticed even Bukoevec ran up to celebrate with her teammates from her goal. Obviously, it's a big moment, one that the players will remember for a long time, I think.
For sure. And shout out to the fans. The town's attendance was 3,502. That's a nice number on a day that, wasn't too great. And earlier in the day, you wouldn't have woken up this morning and said, hey, we don't have tickets yet. Let's go buy tickets to the game today. It was kind of a miserable earlier part of the day. Although actually for most of the match, it was actually not raining.
No, it's kind of been wet and cool all weekend, which I think is pretty typical for a May long weekend in Calgary. And the clouds were certainly dark and foreboding for parts of the match. I looked up a few times expecting to get wet, but they made for some really good conditions for taking photos. And then, it started to rain around the 75th or 80th minute, or maybe even later than that. Like quite late in the game, it started to really come down. But for the vast majority, I was nice and dry.
Immediately after the match, we were both at the press conference. It had head coach Lydia Bedford, goal scorer Jenaya Robertson, and keeper Stephanie Bukoevec. And we're going to run the clip from that press conference now.
Take us through the play.
I'm trying to remember it. Sometimes I have in mind the goldfish when it comes to plays in the game. I just remember Sarah got on the ball and I had to book it forward, and I knew at some point in the game we were going to get a good opportunity, and I did my best to get in the right areas, and we've been practicing a lot in training, and Lydia's been hounding on that, so I'm losing my voice here. So it was really fantastic to get my foot on that. I just had to keep my head down, put my laces through it, and thankfully it went in off the post, so it's pretty cool.
Thoughts seeing it hit that post first?
It was a little nerve-wracking. That split second, but it did go in the back of the net, so I was relieved, and I think the whole team was thrilled. So, yeah.
Okay, Coach, maybe thoughts on the match, just the first half and the second half, and just assess it from your point of view.
Yeah, I think we were really disappointed with last week's performance, and we spoke about it a lot this week, and the response from the players was magnificent. Matchday -2 and 1 this week was probably 2 of our best training sessions in the history of kind of the time we've been together. And I think that just showed that everyone was hungry. And really the only thing I said to them before we went out for the game is bring that to life on the pitch. Forget tactics. If you have more energy and you want it more than they want it, then, you get normally what you deserve. And I think that the last time we played with that intensity was probably the first 25 minutes against Halifax, and it saw us 3-0 up. So I'm just so proud of them because, Montreal was sat top of the table, unless I get my statistics wrong. And I think they've had a great start to the season. But I think everybody in this league is competitive, and on any given day, any team can take points off anybody. And we showed that today by a really gritty and resilient performance that was actually matched with some brilliant technical play. And at halftime, we said crossing and bodies in the box was going to be important. And one of our reflections last week, as Jen said, was that maybe when we crossed, there was too many people on the last line, not enough depth. And Jen held that depth tremendously, and what a finish. I'm thinking back to Macron pre-season and some of our early finishing where we hit windows and, doors on the way. But, for her to step up so confidently and put that in the back of the net, she makes me a very happy coach.
You've seen every team in the league now. What does it mean to knock off that number one team?
I mean, it means everything, for us. We spoke last week. about the fact that if you don't have a great game, taking a point is important. And there's maybe a point with 7 minutes to go where I'm thinking maybe a point is all we're going to get today, even though we've played and probably deserved better. So to take 3 points off of Montreal, now it's about payback. On next Saturday, we play Vancouver, and we reflected on that game previously and felt if we could have gone out and played it the next day, you would have seen an even better performance from us. So I'm excited to hit round 2 of games and let's go. Like, we got to keep pushing.
You waited so long to play at home, and now you do, and you coach back-to-back clean sheets. The importance of making this a very difficult building to play in. How do you feel that have you been successful in that, do you think?
I think so. I mean, you guys call those shutouts, right? Or something like that. Clean sheets, good terminology. Yeah, it's so important. Like I said, you want to take something from every game. And in terms of like the games that we haven't won, generally that's been by 1 goal, which for us is really positive because when you look at the league, I think goal difference will be important as we go. And right now our goal difference is in a good place and we want to keep it that way. But yeah, every clean sheet that Steph keeps and our back line work hard to get gives us a platform to build into games. And I think we saw that against Toronto. Like for us, that was a good team performance where we conceded in the first half and then just couldn't quite get it back. So I think it's really important. You go in at halftime 0-0, you give yourself a platform, and our bench always makes a difference. And it did again today.
And Steph, since you're just stepping in, just wanted to talk about the clean sheets. What are you seeing in front of you that's maybe making your job a little bit more easy?
I think just a little bit more composure and just like kind of playing our style of football. Yeah, just moving the ball and playing the style that we want.
Yeah, it seems like the back four has been the same for most matches, I believe. How's that teamwork? And maybe Stephanie, you could answer this too. Like, how is that cohesiveness coming together so quickly?
I think, often you see back lines stay pretty consistent from game to game. And for us, I think that's given us the opportunity to build. There's definitely times where we want more from our back line. And as Steph said, I think today was a game where our back line stepped up and controlled the game right from the start. Like, we were out every time on the left-hand side of the pitch and they didn't have an answer to it. And I think one of the things in football, when you're getting success, don't stop doing it until that you need to change. And I think second half, Montreal posed us a different problem. And again, our back line recognised it and dealt with it. But it's important that they, get used to playing with each other. And actually, like Ali spent most of pre-season out with, an injury. So for them to actually almost start the season having not played together a lot, it's taken us a few weeks to build. But now I think they're pretty resilient. And I think on top of that, in answer to the question you asked, Steph, like we defend our box fantastically. That's the difference.
Lydia, last week, obviously, Silver Lining was undefeated. This week, clearly very decidedly undefeated. What do you think that means for the fans?
I mean, hopefully they keep coming back, right? Like if, everyone I spoke to that watched last week's game thought it was brilliant. And I was like, oh, it wasn't brilliant in my opinion, but I think it's important. You win games. You show the fans, the respect of going and connecting with them afterwards and you enjoy, that moment with them. They just keep coming back. And for us, I don't know what the numbers were today. I know ticket sales were around 3,500 and obviously it rained. So maybe, not everybody turned up. I don't know. Maybe you'll surprise me in a minute when we get that stat. But we just want them to keep coming and keep building because their noise and the momentum they make every time we do something good pushes this team through. And if we have to get to the last 80 minutes before we put balls at the back of the net, then no problem. But if they're with us, like that will come.
As you're approaching the 80-minute mark and it's still 0-0 and essentially you're looking at back-to-back clean sheets, but you haven't scored, was there a thought of changing anything tactically or just sticking to what you were doing up to that point?
I think when you've got success doing what you're doing, like you don't really need to change. And I think today it was more about personnel and energy. And that's not a reflection of anyone that came off. It's just a reflection of the fact that we trust our bench and we know that we've got players that can come on. Like Maddie Wilson coming on in a wide area. In all honesty, was because I was like, Jen's doing really well. Let's leave her on the pitch a little bit longer. Good decision, eh? Can you imagine history if I take her off? So, that flexibility of players that can play in multiple positions is really important. And, some of the players that were on the bench today who started last week, they didn't really do anything wrong. It's just about actually keeping everyone on their toes. And so, yeah, do you change things? I mean, maybe trying to be a little bit more direct in those final moments and not creating the opportunities where we put ourselves under pressure, which we spoke about in a little break in play. But I thought the girls did that fantastically. And yeah, the style adapts a little bit, but you kind of stick with the principles.
Jenaya, maybe build on that from a player's perspective, just to get into the 86-minute mark and it's still 0-0. What is sort of going through your head?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole game there was some great moments from us. And I think from us, it was just trusting that it was going to come and having that belief and that extra fight in us and digging a ditch together. So I think we did that really well. And that's what it takes in those last few minutes.
Can I add to that?
Yeah,
I think
sure.
we did that last week. You know, when Tegan missed that shot,
Yeah.
we showed that we can score. And so this week, we hit it convincingly. But the fact is we create those chances.
As it stands now for the table in the Northern Super League, Montreal is still in first place at 10 points. And then we have a real logjam at second place, where we've got Calgary, Ottawa, Vancouver, and Toronto all on 7 points.
Yeah, it's quite cool. They haven't all played the same number of games. Actually, Ottawa has only played 4, and then Calgary, Toronto, and Vancouver have each played 5. But yeah, it's really telling, isn't it, that 2/3 of the teams in this league are currently tied on points. And I think I've seen that in every game that Calgary's played against those sides. Like, they're very even.
Yeah, I found it remarkable how even it's been. Like, it does seem like there's a lot of parity in this league. So,
and the Wild, of course, have now played every single team once. So their next game will be against Vancouver, and they'll kind of restart the schedule, so to speak.
And before we finish off with the Wild, there were a few announcements about international call-up. The window for international play on the women's side is right at the end of May. So I believe that it's right around May 29th or 30th, and then into that week after that, into the early first few days of June. It was announced that, I think this was actually announced a bit earlier, but Michaela Moore and Ali Green are both getting called up to play for New Zealand. But it was also announced that Jackie Sawicki is going to play for the Philippines, and recent podcast guest Kaylee Johnson got her first senior call for Australia.
Yeah, very exciting for Kaylee Johnson to get her first senior call up to the Matildas. I checked her Wikipedia page not that long ago, and she played quite a lot of games for, I believe it was Australia's U20s. But now she'll have an opportunity to play for the seniors, which is great for her. And then, yeah, those other 3 you mentioned are international regulars with their respective teams. Probably some long plane trips for all 4 of these players, though.
The international window is coming up. We'll probably talk about it again maybe a bit more next week, because the way the matches line up, the Wild does not have a match exactly in the window, but they've got matches right around the window. So it'll be interesting to see, can everybody come back and what that'll look like. But we'll talk about that in future episodes.
Hi, this is Ali Musi, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, so segueing over to talk about Cavalry FC, their game against Pacific on Saturday was very one-sided, Jason. This was a 4-0 win for Cavalry, their biggest win of the season. Very dominant performance from the hosts at Atco Field. Didn't really seem in doubt from the opening kickoff who was gonna get the 3 points in this one.
Definitely not. You know, the first goal by Cavalry was scored, I think it was in the 6th minute or 7th minute. But yeah, this game never really seemed in doubt. It was a dominating performance. Cavalry played really well, but also by the same token, you know, Pacific really looked terrible. They looked like a team that was not in a good place, and then the wheels really started to fall off in that second half.
Absolutely. You know, they really lost their heads, I think. I do feel that some of the reffing decisions really fell in Cavalry's favor, and I think Pacific fans and players and coaches could truly, like, they can feel hard done by because a lot of calls went their way, but their response to those decisions really didn't help their case. And I think the frustration mounted to the point where they were fouling Cavalry but it just was like a compounding thing where the more calls went Cavalry's way, the angrier Pacific's players got, and the more calls went Cavalry's way. So I think that they definitely lost their cool, and yeah, obviously 4-0. Mikhail Gerasimenkov, you mentioned his first goal of the game early on. That was the pick of the bunch. And then Toby Warshevsky scored a penalty just after the hour mark, after a handball following corner kick. And then less than, I think, 8 or 9 minutes later, Ali Musi got in on the scoring. This was another penalty kick following a foul in the box. And then right on the stroke of full time, Nicholas Veiling scored his first CPL goal for Cavalry with a very nicely taken direct free kick.
What was the thought process of having Moosey do the second penalty? Because it's almost always Toby doing the penalties. And actually, Tommy Wheeldon Jr. mentioned this in the press conference. He said that that was a decision left up to the players, and they decided that Moosey should take it. So I don't really remember the last time, if ever, he took a penalty, Scott.
No, apparently he hadn't scored a penalty in the CPL before this. Adam Jenkins said that. I was watching this one from home, so I had the benefit of hearing all the commentary. He'd missed a penalty before, but he hadn't scored one. And that miss was back in 2022. I can't remember it, to be honest, but that's what Jenkins was saying. But yeah, I mean, take away these 2 penalties, it's still a 2-0 win. I'm looking at the stats right now in this game, and yeah, I mean, Cavalry outshot Pacific 19-5, 7 shots on target. Pacific didn't get a shot on target. 32 touches in the opposition box for Cavalry compared to 9 from Pacific. 52 final third entries. Pacific, I don't know. I last episode rather, I talked about how I was expecting them to come in and give Cavalry a good game, but for whatever reason, they weren't able to do that. The players that they kind of lean on were getting frustrated with each other and their teammates, right? Marco Bustos is an obvious one. Calgarian Christian Greco-Taylor, he got subbed in the second half, and I was excited to see him play. But then he got himself sent off within 25 minutes or less?
17 minutes, I checked.
17 minutes, yeah. He, you were telling me about how frustrated and angry he was acting on the pitch, but yeah, I mean, that second yellow was quite cynical from him, and you can't really argue with the referee's decision.
In the end, I guess Cavalry gets another 3 points and has something else to build on. I'm not sure what Pacific gets out of it right now, but I guess it's back to the drawing board for them, especially with some of their injuries. But meanwhile, you would say right now Cavalry's firing on all cylinders. Like, they look really, really good, and now they're going into another match here, just in a few days.
Yeah, they're red hot at the moment. This was their 4th win in a row. And in those 4 games, they've scored 15 goals and they've only let in 1. Granted, one of those games was a 6-0 cup win over Edmonton Scottish, but can't really take that away from them. They've been red hot since May. And yeah, they're now tied for 3rd in the CPL table with 10 points alongside Forge. Yeah, in the league they're cooking, and as you referenced, they have a game on Wednesday, which is a Canadian Championship game against Vancouver FC.
The first leg will be on Wednesday, and then the second leg will be early part of July. It's quite the gap, but Vancouver has not exactly lit the world on fire this year. They're in 6th place. They lost their last match against Halifax. I don't know. What are your thoughts going into this one? Cavalry's red hot. Vancouver is, I wouldn't say sputtering, but they're not playing anywhere near at the level Cavalry's playing at right now.
Right. I mean, they got a decent draw against Cavalry already in the league, but they've still never beaten Cavalry in what is now their 3rd season. So you have to assume that Cavalry's the favorite in this one, but it is a cup game, and you can't really predict it, right? You've seen some crazy stuff happen in the cup, and I'm, as always, excited to see how everything goes. But yeah, you're right that despite some of their big signings, Vancouver hasn't really been able to progress from where they were last season.
Hi, this is Miguel Da Rocha, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, Scott, let's talk about League One. There was a full slate of matchups on Friday night, and we can start with the all-Calgary matchup that was at Macron, Calgary's against Rangers. Each team was able to win one of the matches. On the women's side, Calgary's beat Rangers 2-1, and on the men's side, Rangers came out on top 3-1 over Calgary's.
Yeah, and in that one, former, I don't know if he's still with Mount Royal University, but Miguel Da Rocha, he scored 2 goals for Rangers. He's a good get for that club. Hey, didn't know who he'd be playing with this summer. But yeah, really, really talented, high caliber player. Good performance from Rangers on the men's side, but on the women's side, as you mentioned, Callie's got the upper hand, 2-1, thanks to a brace from Ali Tanis, who I believe is a MacEwan University player or commit.
She's a commit. I think she's still in grade 11 right now, so she's still got one more year of high school, but she's committed to MacEwan. And yeah, she actually, at 3 goals, she's at the top of the scoring race in League One Alberta on the women's side right now.
Interesting. Yeah, probably a name to keep an eye on then if she's scoring that many goals when still in high school. That's really impressive. And then up in Edmonton, there was a lot of games. Really, I think, intriguing matchup between Foothills and Scottish. And on the women's side, Foothills dominated this one. 4-0 win with Jaden Berg scoring twice, Reese Kincaid getting in on the scoring action, and then Ashlyn Walia scoring as well. And Izzy Monk, former podcast guest, she played her first game of the season for Foothills in this one.
I think Foothills looks a little frightening right now. We were chatting about this at the Wild game, but they still won't have everybody they're going to get. They're going to have the Schneider sisters, and there's a couple other players they still haven't actually got to dress yet. So they're just going to get stronger.
Right. Yeah, we've talked in recent episodes about how with Foothills not fielding a team in UWS this summer, it means that a lot of the players who would have played on that team are instead playing for Foothills in League One. And yeah, they're kind of the super team at the moment, and that's showing in some of the results they've already gotten. Yeah, I mean, once they have the Schneider sisters in defense, I mean, who's going to score against them, right? But other than that game, obviously, Foothills on the men's side also had a really strong outing against Scottish, winning that one 5-2 with familiar name to us, Charles Nana getting in with a goal, and then Robert Woodruff Brown scoring a brace.
Also in Edmonton, BTB hosted Cavalry U21s, and they also hosted Calgary Wild U21s. The Wild match is considered an exhibition, but as far as on the men's side, BTB defeated Cavalry 2-1.
Yeah, and Cavalry's lone goal, very familiar name to people who listen to our podcast regularly, Channon Chanda scoring it, but not enough to grab a point against the Edmontonians. And that's Cavalry's it's only their second game of the season.
Up north in St. Albert, St. Albert Impact played Calgary Villains, and St. Albert did the sweep of the Villains. On the men's side, it was 4-1, and on the women's side, it was 3-1 in favor of the Impact.
Yeah, and I think this is probably the closest game on the men's side that the Villains have had so far, right? They're really struggling, and they've had some lopsided defeats already, but this at least shows that they can sort of hold their own against another team in this division.
Why don't we go over the table real quick here and talk about where everyone's at? On the men's side, BTB is looking pretty good right now. They're at 10 points, and they're in first place.
Yeah, BTB still unbeaten after 4 games with 3 wins and a tie. But breathing down their neck is Calgary Blizzard, who are also unbeaten, albeit only with 3 games, 2 wins and a tie. And then Rangers are in the exact same boat, 7 points from 3 games. Yeah, I mean, are you surprised by this table, Jason? I thought Scottish would be higher up the table than they are. They actually seem to be struggling. But when you look at their game against Cavalry a few weeks ago, I'm not too surprised because they really didn't look prepared for the season yet at that point.
Well, when I look at this table, I noticed 2 things. The first thing is I'm surprised Scottish is near the bottom with 1 point. And I'm also surprised that Rangers, a new team in the league, they're tied for second with 7 points. We've looked at their roster and there's a lot of familiar names with a lot of League One experience, a lot of Mount Royal players. So when you look at their roster, it doesn't seem that surprising. But that being said, they're still a new team and they're really doing quite well.
Yeah, definitely. And segueing over to the women, Blizzard topped the table at the moment, 7 points from 3 games. Strong start to recent podcast guest Cedric Bovan and his team. St. Albert, only 2 games so far, but they are perfect 2 for 2. 6 points for them. And then Foothills in third with 6 points from 3 games. But as you and I have already talked about, they're strengthening their roster pretty much every game, it seems.
There is one matchup involving Calgary-based teams this week on Tuesday. Foothills will be playing that combination of Cavalry U21 and Wild U21 Tuesday evening at the West Soccer Dome. And the men's game is at 7:30. I believe the women's game, it's an exhibition, but I believe it starts before that. Probably, I'm guessing like around 5-ish.
Yeah, probably 5 or 5:30. Excited by this one. I think obviously it's a Calgary versus Calgary. So, and it's actually one that I'm looking at my calendar and thinking I might be able to get to. I haven't honestly been to any League One games yet this season, and I'd like to get to at least one or two. And Tuesday night games are a bit easier for me than Friday night games. So maybe I'll be there. This is Scott Strasser, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. So, as we talked about at the top of the episode, this is our 100th episode. Jason, it's been a little over 2 years. I think our first episode was in March of 2023. So much has changed since then, I think, especially in the world of Calgary soccer. Any additional reflecting you want to do before we sign off on this one?
Yeah, when we started in March of 2023, I don't think we could have, at least on my end, I don't think I could have predicted that we were going to see women's pro team that we'd be covering on a weekly basis, that, League One Alberta, there'd be this many Calgary-based teams. Remember, when we were starting this, I think you and I were both pretty excited about following along with that whole exhibition season with League One Alberta. But at that point, it was just, Blizzard and Foothills and Cavalry U21s. There was not really very much going on in regards to a big amount of teams. And now look at there's 6 Calgary-based teams on both the men's and women's sides. So things have just grown like crazy.
Absolutely, yeah. League One is, I think, a very obvious example of the growth of competitive, high-level amateur Calgary soccer. And then, obviously, the arrival of the Calgary Wild, which was announced. I think we'd already been a podcast for about a year when the Wild was unveiled with their branding and everything. But we did know before that Calgary was going to have a team in what was at the time known as Project 8. Soccer has, I think, come a long way, even just in the time that we've been doing our podcast. But I think, when I wanted to come up with stuff to reflect on for these 100 episodes, what I got thinking about was, some of the stories we've gotten to tell and some of the teams that have had those fairy tale runs to championships or near championships, right? Like thinking about Mount Royal University winning Calgary's first Canada West title since 1980 on the men's side, and then watching SAIT dominate the ACAC in the two falls that we've covered post-secondary, watching Cavalry lift the regular season title in 2023, and then achieve the playoff championship in 2024. And as a result of those two achievements, get to play in the CONCACAF Champions Cup against the likes of Orlando City in 2024, and then against Pumas in 2025. There's been so many cool stories that we've gotten to share with our listeners.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think one of the things I've enjoyed about doing this is that some of those stories that have interested us, we've had a chance to tell them. And I'd like to think that we've had a bit of an opportunity to bring them to a wider audience, which is kind of cool. And I also feel pretty good about how at least I feel on our end, we've stuck true to what we talked about trying to, cover everything, in regards to League One and the university and ACAC and everything like that. We never intended to be like just a Cavalry podcast. We both are, I think Cavalry would be how this all started for us, but I think we always wanted to do and cover more things. And I think we've done a pretty consistent job of carrying through on that mission. And I think I'm pretty proud of that overall.
Me too, definitely. And yeah, another thing I'd like to kind of pat ourselves on the back about is the number of guests and the variety of guests that we've had on. I was thinking about, at this point, I think we've had more than maybe half of the Cavalry roster on our podcast. We've had the two Wheeldon siblings as well as Wheeldon Senior on the podcast, but we've had players, who've gone over to Europe. We've had guys like Mike Van Dale and Chris Daniel talk about the history of pro soccer in Calgary, talking about teams like the Calgary Kickers in the 80s and the Calgary Storm in the early 2000s. We've had all kinds of people come on the podcast. We even had a professional referee, right? So it's been great to share their stories and to kind of talk about soccer through all these different lenses, but all with a very specifically Calgary focus.
I'm going to throw out a bit of a teaser out there, Scott. I'm pretty excited. In the next few episodes, we're anticipating getting someone who maybe isn't on our bucket list that we announced sort of at the beginning of the podcast, but a guest that we've wanted to have on for quite a long time. I think we're going to maybe have a chance to have them on the next few episodes.
Looking forward to that and to all the episodes that come after and the guests we talk to for the next 100 episodes. I'm looking forward to all of it.
And I think I also want to just shout out a few people getting all these guests and doing all these things for the podcast. It's been working with various people involved in the organizations. And I think, when you look at, Cavalry FC, Hannah Wellen has been really good to us about helping us set up things over the years. And we definitely do appreciate what she does. And now with the Wild, Chris Dorman is doing the same kind of things. So, and there's also other people involved with the League One teams that we've been chatting with as well. So it's all very much appreciated.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other podcast sharing platforms. Check out our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find other options to listen, including our YouTube channel. We also have links to buy my book, which is called Here Come the Cavalry, Chronicling the History of Professional Soccer in Calgary. You can leave a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media through Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky, where our username is @YYCSoccer403. Thank you all for listening.